Okay. Hello everyone. Our group policy evaluation is on SB 32. I am Eliza Fortuno.
I'm Lauren Schmidt.
I'm Diane Canelo.
And I'm Nika Masuzawa.
So for problem and consequences, climate change creates conditions including heat and stagnant air, which increase the risk of unhealthful ozone layers. Hotter temperatures and lack of rainfall increase the risk of drought and wildfires, both of which create particle pollution. Ground level ozone, also often called smoke or smog, forms in the atmosphere when gases are emitted from smokestacks and tailpipes and they mix into the air. Many human activities also result in air pollution, which negatively impact human health, the environment, and economic efficiency. According to the latest ALA report, which focuses on ozone, year-round particle pollution, and short-term particle pollution, it is found that California cities occupy the top 3 slots in all categories.
The policy solution is a state-level policy that reduced levels of greenhouse emissions to 40%, which is an expansion of AB 32 in California. It would be regulated by the California State Air Resources Board, CARB, to ensure emissions are reduced. After goals were met in 2016 from the AB 32 policy, which is the reducing in GHGH emissions to 1990 levels by 2020, SB 32 was created and passed in 2016. AB 197 is a comprehensive policy that created legislative oversight of CARB to make sure there is a balance of power as well as accountability and transparency as the group works to meet the bill's emissions goals.
As for policy landscape, there are three previously passed policies that California has passed for climate change mitigation. The first one being California Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006 that was passed. It is a $35.8 million multi-year program to reduce greenhouse gases in the state. The second is the California's Clean Car Standard of 2002, which limited the greenhouse gas emissions from cars made from 2009 and on. And the third being AB 197, which gave power to California Air Resources Board, CARB, and also changed the structure of their committee. And as for public opinion on SB 32, California has been historically very active supporter when it came to climate change mitigation. There were Democratic politicians who opposed the bill, believing that it was not an equitable policy, and oil and manufacturing industries also opposed the bill because it will negatively affect their business. Economists also prefer taxes over cap and trade policy because the revenue that is produced from taxes can be directly used and reinvested within the community. And economists also fear that the policy reduces incentive to invest in research for new technology that will also reduce global gas emissions.
In terms of the logic model, two inputs would be funding to pay for the actions to lower greenhouse gas emissions and protect communities from extreme weather events. Second one being the California Air Resource Board. Activities would consist of CARB developing new programs and actions that fight climate change and help meet the bill's emission goals. A second activity would be to set up plans to protect lower income communities from extreme weather events. A third one would be to set up higher standards for effective air and climate change programs. Some outputs would consist of regulations that are implemented, which are up to par with the higher standard for the maximum technological feasibility and cost effectiveness. Second one being plans for protection against extreme weather conditions being executed in communities. Outcomes would be increased awareness of the importance of actions to reduce GHG emissions. And a second one would be to lower greenhouse gas emissions, being reduced to 40% less than 1990 levels by 2030. The impacts of the logic model would consist of improved respiratory health and overall public health with cleaner air, along with reduced progression of climate change.
Hence, from the logic model, we derive three evaluation questions. One short-term outcome is, did SB 32 increase awareness to the importance of reducing GHG emission? An intermediate outcome was SB 32 effective at reducing GHG emission to its goal levels. Lastly, a long-term outcome is, did the respiratory health and overall health of California residents improve because of SB 32?
So for our evaluation design, we decided to target the intermediate outcome of the question, was SB 32 effective at reducing greenhouse gas emissions to its goal levels? We decided to go with a quasi-experimental time series design because data on historical annual emissions is readily available. This design allows us to evaluate yearly greenhouse gas emissions and determine if SB 32 was effective by comparing the emission levels in million tons in previous years to levels in future years in the state of California overall. This data comes from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the California Air Resources Board. The specific area is a program titled the California Greenhouse Gas Emission Inventory Program, and the timeframe that we're targeting is 30 years from 2000 to 2030, because the policy passed in 2016, so that half of the data will be from before the policy and half would be after the policy. In this next slide, we have an example of the historical data that has come up with a report from the California Air Resources Board and an example of how the data that we want to look. For our impact on health equity, compared to white people, people of color are 3.6 times more likely to live in the most polluted counties. That's from the American Lung Association. Lower income individuals who tend to live near busy roads and warehouses and factories are more vulnerable to air pollution due to higher levels of exposure. Even with lower emissions statewide, there's been increases in local emissions in areas like LA, Oakland, the Central Valley, and the IE from the Berkeley Public Policy Journal.
Evaluation challenges. So there are loopholes that allow for companies to emit greenhouse gases out of state, which was not accounted for within the data that is used for the research. It is also difficult to confirm that the reduction in greenhouse gases emissions is solely from the policy, because there are other policies in place to also help reduce the emission levels. And lastly, verification requirements and data calculations are different depending on the year.
So to combat the high levels of greenhouse gas emissions produced by industrial corporations, SB 32 focuses on decreasing those health disparities for people of color and lower income individuals. By lowering these allowances of emissions each year, this would result in a higher quality of life for the aforementioned individuals, and we would expect to see occurrences of respiratory and other related illness decrease in those groups. Also, by addressing the issue of lower state emissions but higher local emissions, CARB would oversee areas of higher emissions to combat disparities across those different locations.
For our open-ended question, we ask you, would California's SB 32 policy help reduce and impact climate change globally? And that is all we have. Thank you.